All right. You excited to get into God's Word? Are you excited to be out of Ezra? Let's just start there.
I like Ezra.
One of the more somber parts of my job is officiating funerals. So if you thought that part was fun, you're wrong. It's only slightly more fun than officiating weddings. Weddings are absolutely no fun. But funerals, nobody likes jokes at funerals. I can tell you from experience. At some point during the preparation, there has to be some conversations. I want to sit down with someone who can tell me about the deceased. What were their likes? What were their dislikes? What were their pet peeves? What things would they want remembered, and what things would they maybe be embarrassed and ashamed and not want to have brought up here today? And typically, I want to talk to the people who know him best. Okay? So, him or her. Co-workers, I don't care. Really don't care what co-workers have to say. I want to hear close friends. I want to hear children. I want to hear parents. But the two people I really want to get down to are the best friend and the spouse. And occasionally that's the same person. But there's usually a best friend aside from a spouse, and those two can get you a really clear picture of who you're talking about. So if I wanted to ask the question, who knew Jesus best, I would want to talk to his best friend and his spouse. Now, regardless of what any Tom Hanks movie may tell you, Jesus was not married. Okay? Tom Hanks is a great actor. Da Vinci Code's a dumb movie. It's actually a cool movie if you understand it's fiction. So Jesus wasn't married. I digress. He did have a best friend. So I would like to sit and talk with Jesus' best friend. And hey, what was he really like? What was he like when he was tired? What was he like when his hair was down and behind closed doors? Like, not that I think at all Jesus was fake, but we all know there's kind of like work, and then there's home, and you can just kind of relax a little more when you're around your buddies. And I'd really like to know, what was Jesus like? So he didn't have a wife. He kind of had disciples. There were always people crowding around him. There were the 72 that he trained and sent out. There were the 12 disciples that knew him well. There were the 3 in the inner circle, Peter, James, and John. But there was one who was kind of what appears to be closer than the others. John. John, if you look at Scripture, seems like John would have been the guy who was closest to Jesus. I can give you some internal evidence if you look in John chapter 2, and we're going to go to John chapter 13 in a minute. But in John chapter 2, it talks about there were many people flocking to get to Jesus, and they trusted him, but he did not entrust himself to them. Little statements like that are evidence that somebody had a conversation with John. And that's why John knew that Jesus didn't entrust himself to others, that Jesus didn't put expectations on others. At some point, Jesus had to have shared that with John, or John would have just been making it up. John was one of the 3 in the inner circle. Remember Peter, James, and John? When Jesus raised Jairus' daughter from the dead, he went in and there was this little girl, and they said he was dead, and Jesus said, she's not dead, she's just asleep. Little girl, get up. And the girl who was dead got up. Well, he only took 3 people in the room with him, Peter, James, and John. When Jesus went up on top of the mountain and he had an actual conversation with Moses and Elijah, the 3 guys that he brought along with him were Peter, James, and John. In Gethsemane, the night he was arrested, his heart was deeply troubled, and he said, would you guys come pray with me in the garden? The 3 he took in the garden were Peter, James, and John. These were the guys he was closest to. He even had nicknames for 2 of them. So James and John at one point were doing ministry with Jesus, and they're preaching to the Samaritans, and the Samaritans didn't want to hear it. And James and John said, should we call down fire from heaven on these people? And Jesus' nickname from then on was the Sons of Thunder, which I have to imagine he said with a smirk. John is referred to as a disciple whom Jesus loved. At the Last Supper, which we're going to look at here in a minute, Jesus keeps kind of harping on it. He keeps coming back to these 2 terms. He keeps like, love one another as I have loved you, and one of you will betray me. I feel like I'm doing wax on, wax off. That was on, right? But like there's these 2 themes all through that upper room. He's pounding, love one another, but he keeps bringing up this thing that's bothering him. One of you will betray me. And at one point, Peter looks at John and says, just ask him. Like, you ask him. And John leans back and says, who is it? And Jesus says, it's the one whom I dip this bread in and give it to, and he gives the bread to Judas, and Judas is on his way. But Peter knew that Jesus would tell John. When Jesus is saying, one of you will betray me, they're going, not me, not me, not me, not me. That would have been his opportunity to be like, you. But he didn't do that. He wasn't telling them. Yet Peter knew he'll tell John. He tells John everything. John's his buddy. So if I wanted to know what Jesus was like on a day-to-day basis, I would get John on the phone. Problem is, he's dead. He's been dead for 2,000 years, roughly. However, he wrote some books in the Bible. We're going to take a look at 1 John beginning next week. But today, we're going to look into John. The questions I would ask were, what was he like when the crowds weren't around? What were his favorite jokes? What were his favorite stories? What were the sermons that he just kept saying over and over again? Like the Beatitudes. Were you guys sick of hearing about the Beatitudes by the end of the 3 years? Again, blessed are the poor in spirit every time he goes to a new town. Like, what were the things that were a big deal to him? Because I'd like to know, because I want to make them a big deal to me. What got under Jesus' skin? What was it about the religious people that he was like, oh, I tell you what, I'm going to come unglued? What was like the things where you knew he was getting ready to pop because it was coming? That'd be really interesting. So let's look at the Gospel of John. 21 chapters. 0 chapters dedicated to the Christmas story. Doesn't even mention Jesus was born. It just starts out. In the beginning was the Word was God, the Word became flesh. That's the closest thing you're going to get to a Christmas story in the Gospel of John. For 12 chapters, John covers 3 years of ministry. Miracles, teachings, healing, raising people from the dead, fighting with the Pharisees. 12 chapters on that. 5 chapters are dedicated to the Last Supper in the upper room. Only 3 chapters for the trial, the cross, a day at the tomb, and the resurrection, and 1 chapter post-resurrection. So if we're doing a timeline here, that's 5 chapters for 1 evening. For the rest of the book, he goes through the first 12, it's 1 chapter per quarter. Like January, February, March, 1 chapter. April, May, June, 1 chapter. He gets to the night of the upper room, the Last Supper, and he goes 1 chapter per hour. Even moving forward, it goes 1 chapter per day, then 1 chapter per month. There's something about this conversation that John said, when I'm writing the story of Jesus, this is the climax. This is the point. I want to get you to understand what happened that evening, what he said to us that evening. It seems like that's a really big deal because it's a whole lot of real estate dedicated to those chapters. So let's go to John chapter 13. In John chapter 13, Jesus has told the guys, hey, go get a room ready. We're going to sit together. We're going to share the Passover meal. Passover is like Thanksgiving and Christmas all combined. They get in the room, and typically they would wash their feet when they came in the door, but there's no water to wash their feet, so they all just kind of sit around the table. Jesus goes and gets some water. Instead of just putting the bowl of water by the door where they could all wash their feet, Jesus goes around and washes each of their feet, which is it's even weirder to us than it sounds to us in today's day. A teacher wouldn't do that. I mean, maybe a very rich person would have a servant wash their feet, but certainly you wouldn't wash your friend's feet. That's just not the way it goes. Like, hey guys, there's water by the door. Go wash your feet for crying out loud. But yet Jesus goes around and he washes each of their feet. John chapter 13, beginning in verse 12, when he had washed their feet, see, I told you, for those of you who didn't believe, it was right there. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash
One another.
my feet, is what I thought he was going to say. I wash your feet, now you wash mine. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Quid pro quo, Clarice. If you look at younger, squid crow grow, Dr. Evil. As I do outdated pop culture movie references. Nobody, really? All right. No Silence of the Lambs, no Austin Powers. Okay, a couple, good. That was worth the extra 15 minutes I spent working on that this week. I washed your feet, now you should wash my feet. That's kind of how the world works. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. But he says, I have washed your feet, now you wash one another's feet. It's kind of how Jesus worked. He was always on this pay it forward kick. I'm going to teach you. Now you go, you teach someone else. I'm going to love on you. Now you go, love on someone else. They get into the meal, and he keeps kind of circling back to this one of you will betray me thing. It's the one I give the bread to. Only John hears him say that. He gives the bread to Judas, tells Judas, go, do what you have to do. And Judas gets up and leaves. And we know he goes to betray Jesus. The other ones just think he's going to do some errand that Jesus has sent him on. Sorry, skip down to verse 34. Verse 34, Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you. Think this is a big deal or just kind of table talk? Hey guys, a new commandment. You guys know the commandments, right? You know the 10 commandments, the 400 commandments in the Old Testament. A new commandment I give you. Get your pen out. This is important. Look up. Get the food out of your mouth, Thomas. Philip, pay attention. A new commandment I'm going to give you here. Listen, guys, this is huge. Ready? A new commandment that you love one another. That doesn't sound that new. He's been talking this stuff for years. Love one another just as I have loved you. You are to love one another. I love you, now you love one another. Again, it's one of those, I love you, so you should love, not me, you should love one another. I'm going to pour into you, so you pour into each other. I wash you, you wash each other. I love you, you love one another. Now you go and serve and love one another. So when he said, the way I have loved you, the immediate context would have been, man, he just washed our feet. He just humbled himself. But the bigger experience, the last couple of years of their life, they would have thought, man, here's the way he's loved us. He shared things with us that he didn't share with the crowd. So Jesus was infamous for like dropping these little parables, like these 3-sentence teachings, and then saying, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Like, figure it out. And then they get back with the disciples, and they're like, hey, what was the deal with the farmer and the seed? And he's like, oh, guys, the seed is the word of God. And he would explain the parables to the disciples. He would treat them like insiders. He would give them the lesson a little deeper. He would invest in them. He'd pour into them. He taught them, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now he's saying, just do unto others as I have done unto you. He's stepping it up. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as I have loved you. That's even more than you've loved yourself. Verse 35. By this, by loving one another, all people will know you are my disciples if you love one another. That's how people will know we're disciples of Jesus. How well we love in this room. How well, not how well we love our co-workers, not how well we love our unsaved family members, not how well we love our neighbors. I gotta get up and shuffle my neighbor's walk. Great, that's a nice thing to do. That's not a witness to them. They will know you are a disciple of Jesus by your love for one another. That's the Christians in this room, the Christians in other rooms meeting around the world right now. That's what the world is watching. And what's their argument against Christianity? Why would I be a Christian? You guys don't even like each other. You badmouth each other, you fight all the time, you shun people, you don't talk to them. And I used to go to that church, but there are jerks at that church. Who would want to be part of something like that? They're watching how we interact with one another and thinking, I want nothing to do with that. It'll be our love for one another. It says, man, I want relationships like that. I want to be involved in a group like that. I want to know that someone's got my back and I got someone else's back and I'm accepted for who I am and I'm loved for who I am and I'm forgiven. All the things that we're supposed to be known for, somehow we're known for the opposite. Do we love one another? Do I love the way Jesus loved? Everybody just went, of course I do. I'm perfect. I'm so good at loving that when people think I didn't love them, it's because they didn't understand. It's their fault. It's my fault, right, Barb? Yeah. It actually wasn't my fault. So chapter 14, beginning of chapter 15, Jesus goes into some really in-depth teaching on the ministry of the Holy Spirit. And we're going to skip that for now. I'm not skipping the importance of the Holy Spirit. If you have a problem, send Russ an email. He would love to hear about it. I don't. I want to stay on topic. Because in chapter 15 and verse 12, Jesus comes back yet again to pounding this same nail. Chapter 15, now verse 12. Same night, same conversation, same meal. He keeps coming back to this same concept. Verse 12. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Is it starting to sound familiar? What point do you think he's trying to make? Well, maybe love one another like that. See, any of you have children have said, how many times do I have to say, and Jesus knows, you got to repeat it. I used to work for a guy who would say, repetition penetrates the dullest of minds. Repetition penetrates the dullest of minds. Bob. Repetition penetrates the dullest all the time. I don't know what he's getting at. But I think what he meant was, if you keep saying the same thing, even the dumb guy will get it. So here's Jesus pounding this nail. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Now, they had no clue within 14, 15 hours he was going to be hanging on a cross. Like, in their mind, this is like the chalk talk. This is pre-game Super Bowl. We just rode into town on Monday. People were shouting Hosanna. The crowds are, like there was like a bubble ready to burst in Jerusalem. This is going to be epic. They're ready for a fight. They're ready for an uprising. This is going to be the greatest thing ever. And he's saying, no greater love as a friend than one that would lay their life down for them. And he's about to literally do that. This isn't like it's not an illustration. It's not a metaphor. He's about to physically lay his life down. But there's no greater love than someone lay down his life for his friends. Do we lay down our lives for one another? Do we put our lives on hold for one another? We all think we love like Jesus, but if I gave your best friend, who's hopefully in this room, your scorecard, if you had to trade with them, and they had to mark down, how well do you love like Jesus? I wonder what that scorecard would look like. Now, if you do poorly on the test, just blame the teacher. Teacher friends, that's how it works, right? The parents blame the teacher. Like, my kid failed the test, you're a bad teacher. You can blame me, that's okay. So let's do a little self-examination. Can I be counted on? Yeah, I can be counted on. Okay. Do people call on me? Well, no, nobody calls me. You know why? Because you can't be counted on. Do people ask me for help? Yeah, people ask me for help all the time. Oh, okay. No, nobody asks me for help. You know why? Not helpful. Who do you call in an emergency? The person who's going to come help. I got my truck stuck last week. I called Dustin. I knew he'd come help. I didn't call Michelle. She couldn't get that van out of the driveway. That's where I got caught earlier that day. But right, when you're stuck, you call someone who can help. If no one's ever calling on you, you might not be that helpful. You might not be the person that they can rely on. And if they're not calling, why or why not? Why do they call? Why don't they call? Verse 14. You are my friends if you do what I command you. That's my new life verse, right there. John 15:14. You're my friends if you do what I command you. What do you think? I don't think that's what he meant. What did he just command them to do? Love one another. So he's not saying you're my friends if you do what I tell you to do. He's saying you're my friends if you love one another. If that's what you're known for. Verse 15. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I've called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I've made known to you. Everything I've heard from the Father, I've told you. I've confided in you. I've given you insight. I've let you know what I was thinking. Servants don't get to ask why. Why are we doing this? No one, just do it. Like with little kids. Why? Why? Because I said so, that's why. And Jesus is saying, that's not the relationship anymore. It's no longer, I say jump and you say how high. You're my friends. Can you imagine how cool it would be for Jesus to be like, yeah, dude, we're friends? Because I think Jesus is my friend. But it's a whole other thing for Jesus to say that I'm his friend. Jesus said, everything the Father has made known to me, I've made known to you. Do people confide in me? Here's a question. Do people trust me with information? If they don't, because, how do I say this nicely? You're a gossip. One of the things I hold very high, much esteem for, is confidentiality. So much that it frustrates my wife sometimes. Like, oh, did you hear so-and-so's pregnant? Oh yeah, I knew that. Did you hear so-and-so's engaged? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew that. You knew that weeks ago. I did know that weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me? Because they didn't tell me I could tell you. Like, the joke is like, she doesn't know who's coming over for dinner because I didn't know if it was safe to tell her. Like, I'm serious. I repeat nothing except once. I get a text from Michelle that says, hey, Shanna is pregnant. Shanna was our friend at this last church we worked at, and I thought, oh, well, her husband's a friend of mine. So I text Caleb and I say, congratulations, stud. He's at work and texts back, congratulations for what? I'm like, oh, look who's playing a game here. I said, Shanna told me. He said, Shanna told you what? And I went, uh-oh. Because Shanna hadn't told him. She had this big party set up at the house that night. It was a big surprise dinner. And I get a text from Shanna that said, I don't normally swear at pastors, but I had that one coming. And I called Michelle, like, I just told Caleb that shit. Well, you're not supposed to tell him. I'm like, this is why we don't repeat things. Like, this is why. That's it. That was the one time. I'll never do it again. Do people confide in you? Are you someone that people can trust with information? If not, that's something you need to work on if you're going to be a better friend. Oh, here we go. Oh, I guess it's okay. What was your excuse, babe? You should have told me the secret. That's all it is. But I don't want to have this one story, this awkward moment in the sermon. So how cool is it that Jesus had friends? Not employees, not just disciples, but friends. Jesus was fun to be around. Wayne Younger says, if you think Jesus wasn't fun, then you have Jesus confused with church people. Jesus was fun. Listen, when he turned water into wine, and it says everybody at the party was amazed at the wine and nobody knew, but the servants knew. Right? You have to imagine at some point, Jesus is just looking at the servants like, right? Like look at the disciples like, come on, man, that was kind of cool. Right? Because they knew there was a sharing of information. They knew a miracle had taken place. When Jesus taught, he said things like, fellas, why don't you remove the board from your own eye before you try to get the speck out of your brother's? Like, we read that and we think it's so serious. It was a joke. Like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, I gotta remove my own thing. Ha ha. He said at one point, you guys, you're straining out gnats and swallowing camels. You're working so hard to do this law and this law and this law, but you're not loving people. That's a joke. You're straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Ha ha. Like, that was funny then. Like, oh, I see the point he's trying to make. He said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. Oh my goodness. Like, that's a big word picture. Like, wow. He's doing things that would have been humorous at the time. We've just heard it a million times, so we're like, oh, straining out gnats. Lord, I don't want to eat any camels today. That's not the point you're actually eating a camel. It's to observe the whole law. Even when he referred to James and John as the sons of thunder, it's really interesting because the story in Luke 9 says that the people in Samaria rejected Jesus. The story in Mark, same story, says the people in Samaria rejected Jesus. James and John wanted to call down fire from heaven, and Jesus referred to them as the sons of thunder. That's really funny if you understand that Mark wrote his gospel from Peter's information. So Peter gives, remember Peter, James, and John, the inner circle, right? Peter, the guy who's always sticking his foot in his mouth. Peter, the guy who always looks stupid. It's like, write this down right here. He called them sons of thunder. Think about it. Every time something went wrong, would Jesus turn and go, hey fellas, sons of thunder, you guys want to call on fire from heaven on this one too? Ha ha ha, joking, laugh. It's a nickname, it's fun. He didn't actually mean that they were sons of thunder and powerful. It was a loving, teasing type relationship. When Jesus met Nathanael, remember Nathanael said, can anything good come from Nazareth? Jesus meets him and goes, look at this, an Israelite in which whom there's no deceit. What does that mean? Well, he actually said, here's an Israelite who's not like Jacob. Because the name Jacob actually means deceit. Jacob was the man who became, God changed him to Israel. Here's an Israelite who's nothing like his Israelite father. Daniel's like, wow, it's kind of a compliment and a slight, and it's a little bit of, he's joking around with the guy. When he feeds the 5,000, they said, we have to send them home to get food. He turns to Philip and says, hey, Philip, where can we buy bread for these people? They don't have enough money to feed 5,000 people plus women and children. He's messing with them. He was a fun guy to be around. Listen, I have to imagine when they're getting on boats to cross the seas and cross rivers, he inevitably had to look at Peter and go, you want to walk this time? I mean, you did so good last time. Right? Like, you put 13 guys together for a couple months, they're going to have some fun. And Jesus said, you guys are my friends. I like being around you. I choose to be around. This isn't work for me. This is who I love being around. We're way past, Lord, get away from me, I'm a sinful man. You are my friend. If I could choose who I was having Passover with tonight, I would choose you guys. Friends get the real you. Friends get the authentic you. Friends get the transparent you. Do people enjoy being around me? If not, why not? Are you too guarded? Are you not friendly? I mean, Jesus had people hanging around him, but then he had his buddies. Verse 16. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give to you. That would be really cool to be chosen by Jesus. Do you know he chose you? He chose you. He chose you for this day, this moment, this time. The next chapter of John, in John 17, Jesus prays what's called the high priestly prayer. He says, Father, I'm so grateful that you hear me, and I know that you hear me, and I'm so thankful for the ones in this room that you've given to me, and they are yours, and because they're yours, they're mine, and I love them, and not just these in this room, but all those who believe throughout time because of their teaching. And then he prays this powerful prayer over the disciples and over you. He says it's not just for them, it's for all who will believe through their teaching. Jesus chose you as a friend. That's like enough with the, I'm so dirty and terrible and filthy, and if I just get into heaven, I just want an outhouse, and stop that. Jesus loves you. He can't wait to hang out with you. He's called you his friend. He's excited to spend time with you. That should empower you. That should make, okay. I want to represent him well. Do I empower people? Do I encourage people? Or am I just waiting for the moment in the story where you stop talking so I can tell you my great story? Am I always just kind of picking at you and tearing you down? Not like friendly ha-ha, but just like, I've got to make everybody else look bad so I'll look good in comparison. Because that's underneath there. Last year, I drove limousine for a couple months in Birmingham, and I got to spend a lot of time with a lot of very wealthy people. And if you'd asked me 2 years ago what rich people are like, I'd have said, stingy, snobs, quiet. But that was not my experience with any of them. In fact, across the board, I would say overly energetic, overly positive, overly generous. The one guy that I spent the most time with, he was by far the most wealthy man in Birmingham, one of the most wealthy in Alabama. I heard him all the time with his friends. On the phone, he would say, good for you, good for them. Good for you, good for, it was his thing. Good, we'd even joke when we talked about in the office, good for you. You tell him something that happened, good for you, man. He never wanted to talk about himself. Well, good for them, that's great. And he used to say, you put positive energy out in the world, you'll get positive energy back. I don't know about all that. But for sure, a good attitude will welcome a good attitude. He was just such an encouraging guy. There's something to that as Jesus prays this prayer in John 17 about what he wants for us, what he has for us. It's encouraging and it's empowering. And do people leave conversations with you empowered, or do they leave like, oh my gosh, Well, I gotta go. I gotta let you go. I gotta get out of here. Are we loving the way Jesus loved? Look at the people Jesus chose. Remember, I chose you. He chose fishermen. He chose a religious zealot. He chose a tax collector. He chose Judas. Do my friends represent the community I live in? Am I friendly with it? Like, let's just start in this room. Do you have friends in this room? Listen, if you're part of this church and you've been coming here for any amount of time, you should have some friends in this room. Hopefully more than the person you drove in with. Or, well, all my friends, back when I served in the Gulf War, now they live in Missouri. Why? Those are my closest. Those are not your close friends. Those are people you used to be close friends with. Do your friends represent the people that you're doing life with? Because it's easy to put on airs and to act a certain way when there's distance. It's really hard when someone's in your face, in your house, in your life. Verse 17. These things I command you. What do you think he's going to say next? So that you will love
one another.
Love one another. It's a big deal. Over and over, it's a big deal. Listen, we're going to go to 1 John next week. We're going to spend 5 or 6 weeks looking through 1 John. What do you think the theme of 1 John is? Look, where do you think he gets this stuff from? Like, of course, when John sat down to write a letter to the churches, like, all right, what would Jesus say? Love one another. Then he'd say, love one another. And he'd say, love one another. Then he'd throw in, love one another. And he'd probably end with, you guessed it, love one another. That's the whole point. That's what John writes about because John knows how Jesus taught. John devotes 5 chapters of his gospel, over 25%, to this one conversation because this was a big deal. Loving one another is a big deal. Look at how Jesus loved people. He trusted them. He was transparent with them. They saw his anger in the temple when he flipped tables. He let them see that. They saw him cry when Lazarus died. They saw the frustration when he would say, how long do I have to put up with this? They saw the joy when it said, Jesus, filled with joy, commented, the truth of the kingdom has been revealed to these little children and hidden from these religious guys. Like, Jesus was open and honest and transparent. They got the real Jesus. He confided in them. He shared things that were very difficult. One of people betrayed me. Like, this hurts. That night he said, would you come pray with me? Then could you not even pray an hour? When he came back to find them sleeping after he asked them to pray. All that my Father has told me I've made known to you. He trusted these guys. He served them. That night he washed their feet. He spent the last 3 years teaching, training, empowering. He lived with them. They hung out, they had meals, they were doing life together. We've become so independent of relationships, and it's not just because of COVID. It's not the last 10 months I haven't been able to hang out with anybody. Nobody wanted to hang out with you 2 years ago. We just locked ourselves away, and we have like 1,000 Facebook friends, which equals like half of one real friend. It doesn't count. Are we in relationship? Do we love? This is how they will know you are my disciples. If you have more than 1,500 Facebook friends and argue about politics all night long on your phone. No, if you love one another. He shared with them meals, money. Hey guys, we're in this together. If you need something and I have it, here. Just take it. He poured into these guys. He empowered them. He said, go, preach the gospel, heal the sick, cast out demons. And when they came back, he celebrated them with their victories. He didn't hammer them. He didn't beat them up. Well, 9 out of 10 is not bad. He loved these guys. And he put their needs ahead of his. That evening, for sure, he washed their feet. He didn't say, all right, who's going to wash my feet? His entire life was putting people first. And if we're going to love one another, it begins in this room. I don't even know all the people in this room. Perfect. Walk over and shake somebody's hand after church. Elbow bump. I don't care what you're going to do if you're afraid of catching something. Not knowing someone's name is not an excuse for not being nice to them. You're all in church. I give you permission to walk up and say, hey, I don't think we've met. Or, I forgot your name. I don't know why we're afraid to say that. I say it like all the time. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Nobody's ever punched me for that. I just walk up and introduce yourself. If we're going to love one another, it's got to start here. It has to start in this room. And if there's something between you and your brother, don't even get me started on that. That has to be resolved. Because the world is watching. They will know we're his disciples if we love one another. It begins with transparency. Stop being so guarded all the time. Now, I'm not saying when you meet, hey, I can't remember your name, I'm Bob, let me tell you my deepest, darkest secrets. Like, no, that's creepy. Right? I was at Happy Camp one year for a men's retreat, and this dude rides up on this golf cart, and he goes, are you Bob Flaherty? I said, I am Bob Flaherty. He said, are you Jim Povich's friend? I said, I am Jim Povich's friend. He said, I'm going to come find you later and tell you my life story. I thought, no, you're not. That's not how I start friendships right there. And I spent the next 3 days avoiding that guy like the plague. Okay? That's not the way to start. Okay? Hi, my name's Bob. Where are you from? Is this your family? Where do you live? Just ease into it, right? Let's not be super creepy. We were here in a small group Wednesday night, and on small group nights, at least on Wednesdays, we stop, we break up into smaller groups, and then we kind of share some in-depth stuff, and what's said there stays there, but it gives us the opportunity to open up with one another and start to develop deeper friendships. In the next week or two, beginning at 9:30, we're going to have some coffee and donuts here before church to hopefully get some people to come a little bit early and spend some time getting to know each other so that we will be known by our love. We're going to facilitate relationships. I'll even feed you if that's what it takes. So you people who walk in the door at 10 after 10, there won't be any donuts left. I'll stuff 4 in my mouth at 10 o'clock just so you don't get any. Or I'll burn finger first phone, spitting donuts out. I don't care. It's principle. Let's stick to it. Your greatest testimony to an unbelieving world has nothing to do with where you go to church, how often you go, how well you know your Bible, how long you've been married, or how long you served. They are watching how we love one another. And if we're not loving one another well, there is no testimony. They're not interested. The gospel means nothing to them. They're like, that's a scam. It's a lie. You're not even excited about it. You hate the people you go to church with. Or you hate the people at the next church. Somehow it's become so popular in Christianity to talk about who we disagree with and point out everybody else's mistakes. Listen, it would take you all, I've been preaching for 30 minutes? You've probably found something I said that was stupid. I'll watch the video tomorrow and I'll go, oh man, that did not come out right. But we spend all our time harping on one little thing that this guy said, and anyone who listens to the worship music from that church, they're not going to heaven, and anyone who ever quotes that pastor, well, he's not really saved, because one time, in one moment, stop. Why are we known for what we're against instead of being known for what we're for? We're supposed to love one another. Do I love people the way Jesus loved? Do people trust me? Do they depend on me? Do people call on me for help? Do people want to be around me? A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are to love one another. It's as clear as you can make it. It's as clear as I can make it. Father, why does it seem like we have to get hit on